Impact. You've probably heard this term a bajillion times. Take a shot every time you hear the word impact. It makes for a great UX research conference topic because it feels like every UX conference has at least one speaker talking about UX impact. So UX research teams produce a lot of insights, recommendations, and opportunities. Tracking how those insights and recommendations made an impact can be a bit challenging. To give you an example, not too long ago, I had some really good research for my team, but got switched to a different team due to a reorganization of the team. A few months later, my previous teammate messaged me and said, hey, that research that you did increased our metrics on all fronts, conversions, signups, etc. It was great news, but I wouldn't have known about it unless my teammate messaged me about it because I switched teams. So in this module, we're going to talk about what impact is, what to measure, how to measure it, and the reasons why sometimes research doesn't always lead to impact and how to overcome those. So let's begin. What is impact? Impactful UX research, I believe, can be broken down into four main kinds. The first is product or strategic impact. The second is organizational impact. The third is impact on your UX research team. And the fourth, we mustn't forget, our own personal impact. When we understand who our users are, we can unlock clarity and opportunity to impact these four things. Let's start with product or strategic impact. That means you can help your team or product area progress in measurable ways, which oftentimes is the most straightforward to track, right? You do research, make the product better or experience better, easier, or identify opportunities for the product to take a certain direction. The next is organizational impact, being able to shift your organization from a solution-first mindset to a user-first mindset. It's hugely impactful because then we'll be focusing on what really matters the most. And when your immediate team sees the value of being user-first, it'll naturally trickle up to leadership, and then you'll have impacted leadership too. Now, the third kind is UX research impact, or the impact that you have on your team. That's more specific to the user research practice at your company. This is where you, as a researcher, badass UX leader, make your research team a better functional unit. Are you establishing processes or functions that make things more efficient for your team? Are you growing your team's skills and abilities? Are you literally growing the team and hiring more people? All of these things will naturally trickle into the other two categories of impact. And finally, personal impact. Don't forget, you are a badass UX leader.
Come on, you the badass!
You know, keep track of those things where people mention your name, mention how many times they've references your research. What I like to remind my mentees is always to take screenshots of any positive comments that were made about your research so that you can use them for later. In the next lesson, we'll go over 6 steps to measuring UX success. Last fall. It has to work. And if it doesn't, that's fine. Impact. What exactly does tracking impact mean? People talk about it like it's some advanced thing, but it's really not that hard. Tracking impact is basically knowing how your product or service, your process, your team, how anything is doing in relation to before. Are metrics getting better or worse? Staying the same? Are the intangibles getting better or worse? After all, as Einstein said, everything is relative. So step 1 to measuring UX impact is, well, decide what we want to measure and attach those metrics back to the objectives and outcomes. Remember what I said about measuring things? Measurements are inputs and a way to minimize risk. And if we only focus on minimizing risk, we'll never innovate. So the point is, you don't have to track every single thing. Measure what matters to your objectives and desired outcomes. But that's not to say metrics won't come in handy later because goals might change. But the point is, don't do it for the sake of doing it. This is exactly why so many product teams fail. They focus on the wrong numbers when they should be focusing on the core user needs. Another point is, I like to make, data is just data. It doesn't mean anything until you interpret it. And it doesn't mean anything unless you interpret it to something that matters to you.
It doesn't mean anything to me.
All right, step 2. Once you've decided what makes sense to measure, then we got to start planning our study. Step 2 is basically plan your study. And by now we know this step by heart. What are the goals? What are the research questions? How can we answer those questions? And then plan out what study methods we'll use to find the answers. And that's step 2, pretty easy. Just plan out your study. Step 3, believe it or not, is just conducting the study. When we conduct the study for the very first time, this is known as our baseline study. You might also hear a term called benchmarking. Nothing fancy. It's not some special type of research. Benchmarking literally is just using our first study as a point of reference to compare future data to. That's literally what the word benchmark means. When Einstein said that everything's relative, this is what he meant. So what if you got a system usability score of 65? You know, who cares? You don't know what that means unless you keep doing it.
Just, you keep doing it.
So you have something to compare to, right? It's just like any kind of goal in life. If I wanted to, you know, pull up my body weight, I have to first measure how much I weigh. And can I do it? No, maybe I start with some resistance bands to help support me. And then when I get better and better and I get stronger and stronger, then I could do more and more weight. That's the only way you can track progress. So it's just tracking progress.
There's only one way to find out.
And this is where step 4 comes in, comparing and measuring against our new experiences. The more you do it, the more opportunities to improve your experience. So this is a continuous iterative process. This is why race car drivers have lap timers, so they can see exactly how fast they are compared to their previous laps. In fact, we could even get more granular with the metrics.
Next right, track out further.
Not only would we have times for the entire lap, race cars, we could even see specific metrics for specific turns. Like, oh, on turn 4, you were 0.67 seconds slower because you took the turn, you know, 2 feet wider than you should have than the previous lap, you know, something like that. Step 5 to measuring UX success is, finally, as you've guessed it, we need to visualize our data and just tell the story. Show the before and after metrics visually because everything is relative. Without our benchmark, aka the baseline data, it's hard to understand how far we've come and where the experience stacks up.
Sometimes it's hard to understand.
However, one thing I learned from race car driving is that numbers don't tell the whole story. Now, sometimes I get input from more experienced friends who would give me suggestions. Sometimes it's the feel of the car, the confidence I have in the tire's grip around the corner. The sound of the tire starting to screech is an indicator to me that the car is losing grip. But these things aren't numbers, right? Which is why qualitative inputs are just as important as the quantitative ones. And that's it. 5 steps to tracking UX metrics. And as a reminder, continuously track your data because research impact never ends. In fact, this whole lesson, for those of you hawk-eyed and badass leaders, much of it was just following the general research process we learned from Module 4. The only difference is that you're using the first study as a comparison point. So now that we've learned how to measure UX success, what exactly can we track and what does it look like to achieve impact? So in the next lessons, we'll talk about the types of impact that we can track as user researchers. When it comes to talking about impact, we usually think of numbers. You know, we increased conversion by 300%, decreased bounce rates by 87%, reduced project completion time by 15%, decreased the number of shits I give by 99%. 4 kinds of research impact you can have internally at a company. And this chart is a compilation of my experiences having worked as a user researcher at more than 8 companies for 10 plus years, doing more than 1,000 projects, eating 20% more office snacks than I should have. Impact on the actual product or strategy. We can have impact on your organization or team culture. We can have impact on our research team, our immediate research team. Don't forget about your own personal impact too. In this video, let's talk about the impact we can have on product and strategy. The first thing is hard numbers, of course. Things like revenue, churn, engagement, sign-up conversion, user satisfaction, the typical business KPIs. Of course, you can't really track those unless your research actually made changes to certain elements of your product or service. So track those UI changes that were based on your research recommendations or strategic changes that you made. Did your research change the design, any buttons or navigation, better flows, better copy? These are kind of like the interim impact. The numbers will come later. It takes time after implementing design changes. Hey, that's another thing we have to be aware of, because if you make a change to a product, you can't see the numbers change immediately. You can't see them change overnight. You got to give it some time. How much time? Well, that depends on your product, how many users you have, and how often you're getting that feedback cycle. What are real users saying in the real world? Getting feedback from real users will be a sign of impact, especially the good ones. And if not, hey, negative comments are also good. You get a chance to improve it. You know what people were complaining about.
So negative is good.
Something else that's really important to track, and this is more strategic in nature, is whether your research prioritize or deprioritize something. What you can do is inspire new initiatives, spotting problems, not just solving them, right? It goes to huge impact later. When research from one study informs multiple initiatives or efforts, right? You're not just doing siloed research. Research can have an impact on the rest of your company too. And finally, I kind of coined this word at my companies before, but evergreen insights that can be evergreen, like something that lasts forever. Of course, all insights change because users evolve or people evolve over time. So your insights might not change, but there are some things that can be referenced for months, even years down the line. So that's huge impact. A lot of newer user researchers ask me how to show impact if we don't have any hard numbers. Well, you're in luck, because as you saw, not all UX impact is about numbers. We can have impact on the team, we can have impact on the roadmap, the strategy, our organization, in fact. So let's talk about that next. Have you ever wondered what kind of impact you can put on your case studies besides hard numbers? Well, wonder no more, because I'll give you yet another list of research impact that you can track. And this time it's about impacting our team, our organization, or the culture on the whole. These are some of the impact that I have seen and that have promoted in my own work, and also I got some feedback from my students and mentees and people I've met over the years. Let's get started. In order from small to huge impact, right? This is for your team, your organization, your culture, is when more research is requested and when stakeholders ask for studies similar to previous research or request even more research.
More!
Especially, it's really impactful when you're working with people who didn't really believe in research before, or they never really worked with UX research before. They're basically new to user research. Once you've worked with them, they start seeing the value. I mean, that's huge impact on its own, but that's not even the hugest impact. We're gonna get bigger than that, right? And you can work with them, and the key word is work with. Once you build those partnerships with stakeholders and they care to listen to you, you're becoming that go-to expert that they can seek out to, actually listen to your user insight. Once you do more research, hopefully it's just not, hey, we built this product and can you do this research for us to validate? Hopefully we turn a reactive culture into a proactive research culture. And that's getting to a larger impact, because now you're not just doing research, you're inserting yourself, or research has been inserted into the fabric of how things are done at the company. And being proactive means they're not going to come to you at the very end. They're going to come to you early. Then we get to dissemination of information, right? Where research is actually shared, praised, and utilized across communication channels. And I think the ultimate impact is when your stakeholders start talking about your user insights, and they rely on insights rather than guessing or solutioning, and they understand what the process requires, and they start sharing things for you. Right? They become an evangelist for research for you. And I think that's the ultimate huge impact. So I hope that gives you a few ideas of things to track that aren't necessarily just hard numbers and are equally, if not more, important in our line of work. And that's team and organizational impact, some leadership impact because you might influence some people who are in leadership positions. Let's wrap this up. Let's do the next one, which is influence on our UX research team. In another edition of Impact Doesn't Have to Be Just Numbers, we're gonna talk about making a better user research team. Data skills, right? First thing you can influence, this is starting small to large again. You have a team with complementing skills, and this is gonna be mixed methods. You have quant people, you have qual people, all doing the research together and kind of working together to triangulate these informations. Then you have collaboration with other research functions. So not just user research, but other research functions, anyone who does research. So that could be data scientists, analysts, market researchers, product managers sometimes do it too. So it really depends on the maturity of your UX culture. But when you're starting to work with different research functions, that is, you're gonna combine, you're gonna be even more of a research powerhouse. Next is establishing any kind of research operations processes to kind of streamline your operations more efficiently. Ample research operations to support, recruiting, participation, incentives, participant tracking. All those things take time. And I worked in a company as a solo researcher before, and I had to recruit, I had to source participants, I had to come up with incentives and work out vendors to do that. So it was a lot of time. So if you can build up a research operations, that's huge, because then the researchers can spend more time doing research. Other impact that you can track and have influence on is if you come up with better processes for yourself, for your team, share it. Maybe you've done things quicker this way. Maybe this way is more efficient this way. Share it with your team. If everyone can have a higher efficiency, that's impact. And measure that too, if you can, right? That could be processes, how you come up with different documentations for things, how you ask the right questions. Do you have a template for stuff? Come up with templates. And it's exactly what I shared in Module 4. A lot of the things that you can kind of pull out your toolkit. Here are the pros and cons of research methods. Let's make this faster. Here's how to recruit participants. Here's our templates for outreach. Here are incentives vendors and whatnot. Every little thing that makes your life easier, systemize it, systematize it. You don't do it step by step every time from the ground up. Now you have a system. It's like, all right, if we need to do this, these are the steps that we need to take. And here's a checklist too. And here's all the resources that's tied to this process. Makes it way easier. And I think this is more of a philosophical thing, but research is a guiding light, not just for your organization, your immediate team, but they serve as a guiding light function. Every team has user research capabilities. That'll be even better, because now you're not just, who do I have to support? It's every team starts with research, and every team has a researcher. And that'll be great. That's a great way to be scaled. It's not normally the case, but that's kind of an idealized state. And if you come up with any more that I've missed here, please let me know. I'm constantly updating this chart. Plus, that empty box at the bottom bothers me. I've been able to present my research directly to the CEOs of StubHub and Upwork before, which is pretty cool. And the CEO gave me a shout out once, and I screenshotted that shit so quick. And this is more personal impact to track. Hey, if anyone gives you a shout out, recognition, kudos, praise, feedback on how your research project impacted the project, hey, screenshot that shit and make sure you keep it for performance reviews later on. I'll definitely talk more about this type of impact on the career module. Make sure you give yourself some love too.
I love myself.
You're giving research process, you're giving the culture, you're giving the product some love, well, give yourself some love too. That means if anyone else giving you love, you gotta screenshot that shit. Count them, like number of references to your research insights, your presentations and decks, and finally, who and how many people attend your sessions, your sprints, your presentations, like how scalable are you making your influence on research and the team and the product and the insights, okay? And how often. This is more of a minor thing. I've seen charts similar to this, but they only mention the first three. They don't really mention the personal impact. So I hope I gave you some ideas on what to track, because these aren't always as obvious to people that they are impact. Not hard numbers all the time, because that's not the only impact you can have, as I hope that you now can see. So thanks for watching Badass UX Leader, and get out there and make some impact. But come on back later, because I'll talk about why research doesn't always lead to impact. You want to stay tuned for that one.